Hello and welcome back. Today I wanted to briefly deviate from the usual format where we focus on specific chapters and dedicate an episode to getting to know Nephi. Nephi is one of only a few people in the Book of Mormon where we have enough information to do a character sketch. By the way, now's the time to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Nephi was amazing and he accomplished a lot of incredible things. But we forget that he was also human, with weaknesses and idiosyncrasies. And I don't know if you've ever personally known a top performer in the world of business or sports who accepted no excuses and stopped at nothing to accomplish what they set out to do. If you've known someone like this, you'll know that they just operate differently. Think of someone like the basketball player Michael Jordan. The man refused to lose, but people who know him say that not only did he need to win every basketball game, he needed to win every argument, which could make him a little tough to be around. People who get incredible results tend to be wired a little differently than other people. And Nephi got incredible results. Let's look at his resume. As a teenager, he went into Jerusalem, the nation's capital, and retrieved one of the city's most important records from one of its most powerful men. He was largely responsible for helping a group of several dozen people survive an 8-year journey across the Arabian Peninsula. Despite having no seafaring knowledge, he created plans and then directed a crew that built a ship capable of crossing the ocean, and then crossed the ocean in it. Any one of those things would have made him a legend, but he did all three. Nephi must have been put together a little differently. He was also unusually good at forgiving and avoiding grudges. In fact, he was so good that it makes me wonder if he processed emotions and feelings the same way that the rest of us do. At the end of 1 Nephi chapter 3, for example, his older two brothers beat him with a rod, but there's no indication that Nephi held a grudge or any feelings of resentment against them. In 1 Nephi 7, Nephi's brothers and Ishmael's sons physically overpowered him in the desert and tied him up and planned to kill him. After the situation calmed down, Nephi said, "I did frankly forgive them all that they had done." Then in chapter 17, Nephi's brothers tried to kill him by throwing him into the ocean, probably from a high cliff. But not long after that, they were happily working together building a ship. But if you were to ask Laman to describe Nephi, he probably wouldn't describe him as forgiving or valiant or righteous. More likely, he'd describe him as being completely nuts. It's one thing to read in the scriptures about someone with pedal-to-the-metal obedience, which is a good thing, by the way, but it's another thing to live with such a person. I'll give some examples. When Laban refused to give up the brass plates, Nephi's solution was to try to bribe him with the family fortune. Laban sent his servants to kill Nephi and his brothers, and then he kept their treasure anyway. When you consider that the family fortune was Laman's inheritance as the oldest son, if I were Laman, I probably would have beat Nephi with a stick too. And throughout the whole brass plates incident, Laman was probably saying, "Slow down, Nephi, you're going way too fast and you're going to get us killed." If you want another reason why Laman would have thought he was crazy, Lehi's group that traveled through the desert consisted of families with small kids and wives having babies. And they spent 8 years in the wilderness eating raw meat, probably mostly mice, lizards, grubs, and other tiny critters. The women and mothers complained and wanted to return to Jerusalem. Laman and Lemuel said it would have been better if everyone had died rather than go through what they went through in the wilderness. Lehi referred to this part of the journey as the wilderness of his afflictions and the days of his greatest sorrow. But when Nephi talked about this part of the journey, he talked about how blessed they were. I kind of get a mental picture of Nephi boiling over with excitement as he tells everybody, "There's a massive termite mound just over the next ridge. The Lord came through again. There's enough termites for everyone." They survived the journey thanks to Nephi, but that kid was put together different. And the Lord needed someone built differently, otherwise the group wouldn't have made it. Also, and I'm not sure if it's because he was the youngest for so long, but Nephi had a bit of a temper. Think I'm making things up? Go to 2 Nephi 4, and Nephi spends half the chapter asking the Lord for help overcoming his anger problem. And why did his brothers want to throw him into the ocean? Well, if you read the verses right before it, Nephi was trying to talk them into helping him build a ship, and it escalated into Nephi calling them murderers. And there's several other examples where Nephi rebuked or scolded his brothers for not doing something that they should be doing. His brain didn't seem able to process or understand disobedience. Have you ever met someone, or did you grow up with someone who was that way? Lehi, in his final words in 2 Nephi 1:26, acknowledged this issue. Nephi had used sharpness with Laman and Lemuel. He had been angry with them. But, said Lehi, when he rebuked them, he was simply being an instrument in God's hands. Are you okay with that family member who always reminds you what you should or shouldn't be doing? Laman and Lemuel weren't okay with it. They apparently believed in a top-down structure like the military, where you don't criticize or talk back to someone who outranks you. So when Nephi corrected them, they said he was trying to be the leader. And we often think of Nephi as the group's leader, but he wasn't. Lehi was the leader. Nephi played a supporting role. But what a supporting role he played. Nephi might be one of the best examples in the scriptures of what it means to sustain a leader. For example, the family ran out of food while they were traveling across the Arabian Peninsula, probably several times, but there's one incident in particular that it talks about. The hunters' bows and arrows had broken, and Lehi, the group's leader, had essentially given up. Nephi made a bow and arrow, and then this part is important. He went to his father and asked him where he should go to obtain food. When Lehi needed to cross the ocean, Nephi made tools from ore and, with the Lord's help, figured out how to build a ship. Then when the project was finished, Nephi says, "The voice of the Lord came unto my father, that we should arise and go down into the ship." Lehi was in charge. In fact, in the whole book of 1 Nephi, there's no indication that Nephi tried to lead anything. He let the leader decide what needed to be done, but once the leader decided, by golly, Nephi made sure that it happened. And his brothers resented him for this. Possibly they were envious, wishing they could be the ones who were getting things done. Lehi, though, was more humble. He didn't resent Nephi. He had learned from experience that although Nephi could be hard to live with, he was the whole reason the group had survived. As he says in his final words in 2 Nephi 1, "If you will hearken to the voice of Nephi, you shall not perish." Nephi didn't need to be in charge, but they at least needed to listen to him. And then he continued by telling Laman, "And if you will hearken unto him, I leave unto you a blessing, even my first blessing." In other words, Laman was Lehi's heir and the group's leader, and would continue to be, as long as he didn't ignore Nephi. And Nephi's role would continue to be assistant and advisor. But if not, Lehi says in the following verse, "If you will not hearken unto him, I take away my first blessing, yea, even my blessing, and it shall rest upon him." But Laman couldn't handle Nephi's input. Not long after Lehi died, Nephi said he had to scold his brothers again, and that was the end of it. To avoid being killed, Nephi and anyone who would follow him had to flee from Laman and Lemuel and the sons of Ishmael and start their own settlement. And then, for the first time, Nephi actually was in charge. And it turns out that the traits that had made Nephi such a valuable resource and supporter also made him an amazing leader. He was so beloved by his people that they not only made him king, but as we see in the book of Jacob, the name of Nephi became synonymous with king. The king following Nephi was called the second Nephi. And there's a lot more that we could say about him. We could discuss his witness of the Savior, or his love for the scriptures in general, and Isaiah in particular. We could go on, but we'll need to wrap it up. Hopefully this has been helpful. To me it is. I find the scriptures to be more relatable when the characters are less one-dimensional and resemble real people. Let me know in the comments if this kind of character sketch was helpful. Also, Is there anyone else who you think we should cover in the same way? I've got a few others in mind, but I'd like to know what you think. And we will see you next time.